Hello, my name is Rian. I'm a girl and this experience isn't mine. It happened to my sister. I'm currently 17 years old. This situation happened when my sister was very young, about 5 or 6. It was our relative's birthday party. At that time, I wasn't born yet. My sister and I have a 5-year age gap. While people were enjoying the party, casually eating and celebrating my relative's birthday, my sister approached my dad and said,
"Dad, who was that green figure in the house?"
My dad was confused and asked what figure she meant. She told him,
"It's a guy. He looks green and his body has muscles, but he doesn't have a head."
Everyone who heard it was suddenly terrified. How could a young girl say something like that? My dad is a very religious person, someone who believes he has a deep relationship with God. Because of that, he stayed calm. He believed my sister and asked her to point where the figure was. My sister pointed toward the top of the stairs. My dad gently told her it was nothing so she wouldn't be scared, since she was far too young to see something like that. Then he tried to distract her and let her go back to enjoying the party. While my sister was telling me this story, she explained that the house had been built in the 1980s, so it was already pretty old. She also said the house always felt dark and creepy. Even when the lights were on, it somehow still felt dark, like the place carried an uncomfortable feeling that never went away. She told me she would never forget what she saw that night because she still remembers it exactly the same way. This happened when my father moved from quarter number 3 to quarter number 5. The 5th building was located right beside a huge park. It was a large park where children had stopped playing, or if they did play, it was only in the far corner. Most people avoided the park, and even the tall, stout watchmen who roamed the quarters at night were afraid to go near it. One night, at around 2 in the morning, my dad woke up and saw my grandmother standing by the window watching something outside. He tried to ask her what was happening because he could tell something wasn't right. My grandmother told my father to stay quiet and pointed her finger toward the park. In the distance, what my father saw gave him chills for the rest of his life. He saw a seesaw going up and down, and the swings moving back and forth all by themselves. My father watched in horror as the swing and the seesaw continued their ghostly motion. Later, people said that a Christian family had lived in the quarters a few years earlier and had a young child. The boy was mischievous and spent most of his days playing in that same park. One day, while he was playing there, a terrible accident happened. The seesaw came down and fatally struck him in the head. This story truly scared both my father and me. Since that incident, the large park that was once full of people has remained strangely quiet. And sometimes, the only sound you can hear is the slow creaking of the seesaw and the swings moving in the empty park. I'd like to share a scary story that my aunt told me about my grandma. For some context, this story took place back in Vietnam not too long after the Vietnam War. My grandma was 6 years old and lived in a very old house. The house had been built over an area where many people died. Back then, Vietnam was a very poor country, and people didn't always have the time or resources to find and bury all the bodies after the war. Some were simply left where they fell, and houses were later built over the land where they had died. One night, my grandma attended a family gathering. Relatives had gathered in her house to celebrate and chat. My grandma, being a child, went off to play with her cousins and mind their own business. After a while, her uncle called for my grandma, but she didn't come. She was missing. After a few minutes of calling her, her relatives started to worry. When they asked her cousins where she was, they said they didn't know. Everyone quickly began searching everywhere for her. Almost an hour passed before her uncle finally found her, crouched behind a door. He asked her why she didn't answer when he called her. She slowly looked at him with bloodshot eyes. Then she replied in Vietnamese,
"How dare you speak to me like that? Do you know how old I am compared to you?"
Her voice was not her own. It sounded that of a grown woman. Her uncle tried to talk to her and reasoned with her, but she kept shouting at him in a crazed manner. Worried, her relatives reached out to a shaman. He was very old and had apparently rid people of spirits and possessions his entire life. He took one look at my grandma and immediately frowned.
"This child is possessed by a very old spirit,"
he said.
"If we do not remove the spirit, her soul will be lost forever."
The old man told her uncle to bring her to his home in the mountains at midnight, and then he left. Until then, my grandma just sat in the same corner, mumbling to herself. When the time finally came, her uncle tried to get my grandma to leave the house, but she resisted. It was as if the spirit knew what they were planning to do. It knew they were going to drive it out. Her uncle, with the help of several relatives, had to basically drag my grandma to the shaman's house. She screamed the whole way and refused to walk. But when they reached the shaman's yard, my grandma suddenly started moving on her own. She slowly began walking inside the house on her knees. The spirit was clearly trying to resist. It was as if some invisible force was pulling her into the house. When they got inside, the shaman told them that the spirit was very powerful. He said he was already old and weak, and if he performed the exorcism, he might die. But the shaman was willing to do it anyway. According to him, he had spent his entire life doing this work, and letting my grandma die now would make his life's work meaningless. My grandma was placed in the middle of the room. Papers covered the walls, each one with strange symbols written on them. She remained on her knees. In front of her was a long sheet of paper that stretched across the floor toward the shaman. At each corner of the room, there were small piles of salt. The old man told the spirit to leave my grandma's body, then began mumbling words that no one understood. Suddenly, the papers on the wall caught fire and started burning. The salt in the corners of the room turned black. My grandma began moving forward on her knees, slowly approaching the shaman. The long paper in front of her started burning as she moved. When she finally reached him and the last paper burned away, she suddenly collapsed and fell unconscious. After that night, she was never possessed again, but the shaman died shortly afterward. My grandma says she doesn't remember anything that happened that night, but all of her relatives insist that it's true, and they say they witnessed everything themselves. Apparently, after the incident, my grandma gained what they call a third sense. She could supposedly feel when spirits or strange energies were nearby, and whether they were good or bad. Honestly, I don't know much about spiritual things, but while my aunt was telling me this story, I kept getting goosebumps the entire time. This happened back in 2019 when my family moved to a small rural town in Pennsylvania. The move happened pretty suddenly because of my dad's job, and the house we moved into was an old standalone place, right next to the woods. For a while, everything was completely normal, until one day, we heard the sound of glass shattering coming from the attic. We all froze and gathered underneath the attic entrance. My dad grabbed a baseball bat and slowly climbed up to check it out. We searched the entire attic, but couldn't find anything unusual. The only thing wrong was the broken window. There were no signs of forced entry, no footprints, nothing. After coming back down, he looked unusually serious and said to my mom, "The way the glass broke, it kinda looks like someone smashed it from inside the attic and went out." My mom immediately went pale and told him that made no sense. If someone had climbed out through the attic window, there should have been marks on the roof or around the house, but there was absolutely nothing. We never figured it out. A few days later, I was walking down the hallway when I noticed the attic door slightly open. I called my dad again, and when he went up this time, there was a horrible smell, like a strong ammonia, almost like someone had urinated up there. But again, no signs of anyone being there, no stains, no evidence. At that point, my dad actually started suspecting me, telling me to stop messing around. I swear I hadn't done anything. That night, I noticed a document file on my computer desktop that I'd never seen before. When I opened it, there was only one sentence written inside: "A spirit pissed in the attic." I just sat there staring at it. Who the hell would even do something like this? I assumed my younger brother was pulling some stupid prank, so I confronted him. But he started crying, insisting he didn't do it. So then, who did? I almost typed back into the document asking, "What do you want?" But I stopped myself and just deleted the file. Things stayed quiet for a while after that. Then one day, my brother suddenly screamed. We found him collapsed beneath the attic entrance, crying hysterically. When my parents asked what happened, he said he saw someone through the slightly open attic door. He said it looked exactly like me, but its entire body was covered in white fur, and its mouth was stretched unnaturally wide across its whole face. According to my brother, it leaned toward him and whispered,
"Your brother is dead."
Then it smiled. My dad rushed up to the attic again, but, like every other time, nobody was there. My brother was shaking uncontrollably and had to be taken to the hospital. Thankfully, he wasn't physically harmed, but he suffered serious psychological effects for a long time afterward. After that, my dad permanently sealed the attic shut and locked it. Nothing major happened again after that. But one night, while I was outside, I looked up at the attic window and noticed something strange. It looked like a dim red light was glowing from inside. The problem was, there was nothing up there that could produce light. We didn't go up to check. The next day, the red glow was gone, and everything looked normal again. My dad even tried researching the history of the house, hoping to find out if something had happened there before, but he never found anything meaningful. This story takes place in the fall of 2022. Lakeside Park was about a 30-minute walk from my apartment, a beautiful park right next to a lake. I usually went there at night to walk. There weren't many people there, so I enjoyed the quiet alone. One night, I was sitting alone on a bench in the park, playing on my phone. The fog was thick and eerie, and I was watching a horror anime. Then, I heard someone walking. At first, I didn't pay attention, but suddenly, the air felt warm. I raised my head and looked at him, but I was a little surprised. There was something strange about his face. His eyes were very large, but the whites were very dark. His pupils were very small, and smoke was coming out of his pointed nostrils. At first, I thought it was cigarette smoke, but what struck me even stranger was that I'd seen his face somewhere before, but I couldn't quite remember who it was. For a moment, I wondered if I'd seen him in a movie before. I wondered if he was an actor from a horror film. I couldn't say anything, just staring at him. He slowly approached me, then stopped and stared intently. Smoke was still coming out of his nose, but it wasn't cigarette smoke. It was a thick gray. There was fog all around, but fog couldn't possibly be that gray. He just stared at me, and uncomfortable silence fell. Finally, he spoke.
"Doesn't my face look familiar?"
I answered, "Yes." And the moment I heard his voice, I felt a strange chill run down my spine. There was no reason. It was as if my nervous system instinctively sensed danger. And then he said,
"It's a very nice day today. Peaceful, quiet, no one else around."
and smiled. I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled awkwardly. Then he said,
"You still don't know who I am, but you will. You always do."
He said that, then smiled, and continued to stare at me. Looking into his eyes, an inexplicable sense of discomfort and anxiety welled up inside me. I looked around, and it seemed like the man and I were alone in the thick fog. There was no one around. I suddenly became incredibly scared and started running. He yelled at me to stop, but I ran without looking back. The fog was so thick I couldn't see, but I kept running. At some point, I left the park, and when I looked back, he was gone. On my way home, I struggled for a long time to remember who he was, but I couldn't remember at all. Finally, when I got home, I felt a sense of relief. So I took a warm shower, and then, all of a sudden, a memory flashed through me like a bolt of lightning. He was a man who'd occasionally appeared in my dreams since I was little, and not just any dreams, but truly horrific dreams. He did some things to me in those dreams. One time, he stabbed me with something like a huge skewer and then roasted me over a huge bonfire. It was like a barbecue. The bonfire was so big it felt like a small mountain. And one day, he put me in a huge vat of boiling water, and underneath the vat, it felt like I could touch other people's hands or feet. I still remember vividly how real those feelings and the hot pain were. Every time that happened, I'd wake up screaming, run to my mom, and tell her about the dream. Then she'd come over with a Bible and pray for me. And another thing I remember is that in my dream, he had a tail. A very long, pointy tail. But when I saw him in the park that day, he didn't have a tail. The moment I remembered, I suddenly felt incredibly dizzy and collapsed on the floor. The next day, I went to a psychiatrist. The doctor listened to my story in silence and prescribed medication to reduce my anxiety. After that, I slowly regained my composure, and thankfully, the man hasn't appeared in front of me again. He hasn't appeared in my dreams either. But I'm afraid of when he'll show up again. But what scares me more than all the endless questions that keep popping up in my head? Who is he? And what does he want from me? Eventually, I came to a conclusion. He had come that day to take me to hell. Because the lake was covered in thick fog that day, so much so that I couldn't even tell where I was standing. It felt like I wasn't even in this world. If I hadn't run away then, I think I would have vanished into that fog forever.